Sheryl Swoopes got fired last year from every single WNBA broadcast, not just Fever games. Every game, gone. And now, she's out here begging Caitlin Clark to help her get a job back. Let that sink in for a second. The same woman who spent an entire 2 years calling Clark's records illegitimate, who got into public fights with Stephen A. Smith and Nancy Lieberman, is now showing up on live TV and podcasts, backtracking everything she said about Clark in the hopes of getting in the good graces of the face of the WNBA. And honestly, you're not going to believe what she asked the Indiana Fever directly. That part comes later, and it's so much worse than you think. Does Swoopes deserve everything that's happening to her? Let me know down in the comments below.
She got fired, but it looked like you got fired, bro. It looked like she got fired. I just gotta keep it real. It looked like she got fired.
Being a hater of Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever in Clark's rookie season, even insinuating that players would flee the team because of the attention around the team.
But before we get into how Swoopes got herself fired from every WNBA broadcast in the league, you need to know about Loyola University Chicago, because that story tells you exactly who you're dealing with. When Loyola hired Swoopes as head coach of their women's basketball program, it felt like a win for the school. Hall of Fame career, 3 WNBA championships, one of the most decorated players the sport had ever produced. Programs would line up for that kind of name recognition on their letterhead, and Loyola landed it. What they didn't see coming was what that actually looked like on the inside of a locker room.
Loyola University basketball coach Sheryl Swoopes, she's under investigation, accused of mistreating players. The college coach is not only under fire, but under investigation after reports that the majority of her roster has decided to leave.
Within a couple of seasons, players started leaving, and not 1 or 2 transferring out like you'd see at any program. After the 2014 to 2015 season, 5 players transferred. Then the following year, 10 of the 12 returning players requested release from their scholarships. 10 out of 12? These were players Swoopes herself had recruited, players she'd personally sold on coming to Loyola. And they wanted out so badly, they were willing to give up their scholarships to make it happen.
Just because you are a great player doesn't make you a great coach.
Former Loyola basketball player Kate Sohn says Swoopes caused the players to live in fear, that she routinely threatened that they would lose their scholarships or she would cut them from the team.
It made it hard to play. It wasn't about working hard and having fun anymore. It was about surviving.
Former players described an environment where Swoopes threatened scholarship losses when players stepped out of line, and where personal things players shared with her in confidence somehow ended up getting used against them later, repeated to teammates, to recruits, to the athletic department. One former player, Lauren Hibbard, alleged that Swoopes pressured her to sign a medical hardship waiver after knee injuries, promising her a manager role with travel perks to sweeten it, then pulled those perks away after Hibbard signed, which effectively ended her last 2 years of NCAA eligibility. That's not a misunderstanding or a personality clash. That's something else entirely. Loyola launched a formal independent investigation in April 2016, and it wasn't a quiet internal process. It documented the maltreatment, and when it wrapped up, the school terminated Swoopes. Not a mutual parting of ways, not a resignation to spend more time with family. Fired.
That she mistreated players.
It was the environment she had created. I was belittled, humiliated, made to feel extremely small.
Head coach since 2013. Last year, 5 of her players reportedly transferred to different programs. And this year, a reported 10 of the team's 12 players aren't planning on coming back.
So when you look at what she did to Clark on those Wings broadcasts years later, picking a target, repeating false claims, doubling down every time someone corrected her, the pattern isn't new. At Loyola, she targeted players who had no public platform to push back. With Clark, she tried the same approach on someone who had millions of fans, colleagues willing to pull out actual statistics, and a league that was starting to pay very close attention to what its broadcasters were saying on air. The Loyola firing didn't prompt any visible change in how Swoopes operated. She moved into broadcasting, built a role covering the Dallas Wings, and by 2024 was running the exact same playbook she'd used in coaching. Pick a target, repeat the claim, refuse to back down when the facts show up. And the facts did show up, in the form of Nancy Lieberman posting screenshots and Stephen A. Smith calling her position insane on national television.
You asked me about Caitlin. If you're going to break a record, to me, if it's legitimate, you have to break that record in the same amount of time that that player set it.
Okay.
Right? So if Kelsey Plum set that record in 4 years, well, Caitlin should have broke that record in 4 years. But because there's a COVID year, and then there's another year, you know what I mean? So she's already had an extra year to break that record. So is it truly a broken record?
Picture this. You're a broadcaster on Dallas Wings games, Caitlin Clark and the Fever come to town, and instead of calling the game, you go on to Gil's Arena and start telling people Clark's college scoring record doesn't really count. That's what Swoopes did in January 2024, and the argument she made was so sloppy that it fell apart almost immediately. Her claim was that Clark had played during COVID-era seasons, which gave opponents an extra year of eligibility. So Clark was essentially a fifth-year player breaking a record that Kelsey Plum set in 4 years. If Kelsey Plum set that record in 4 years, well, Caitlin should have broke that record in 4 years, Swoopes argued, then flatly stated the record shouldn't count. But that wasn't even the worst part. Swoopes also claimed Clark was taking 40 shots a game, which is just not a real number. Clark's actual average was 22.7 shots per game, which was barely more than Swoopes' own senior year average of 19.2. So Swoopes was out there exaggerating Clark's shot attempts to make Clark sound like a ball hog, using numbers that weren't even that far off from her own career stats.
People in the Fever were like, y'all.
That's not my point. There's a lot of other shit going on that players are like, this ain't where I want to be.
Over there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some new shit
it's
going
a
on
lot.
around there.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
So you have players that are very significant on this Indiana Fever team that are like, I don't
want to be here.
This is where I want to be.
Yeah.
Nancy Lieberman didn't let it go. Lieberman, a Hall of Famer herself, posted actual screenshots of Clark's statistics broken down by season, showing the numbers held up no matter how you tried to slice the eligibility question. Lieberman didn't write a long essay about it. She put the data out there and told Swoopes to acknowledge she was wrong. Swoopes pushed back instead, which turned something correctable into a full public feud between two Hall of Famers, and the optics were brutal for the one whose numbers were wrong.
I got off the treadmill and I called her as a friend and I said, you know, you can say whatever you want. You can have your own opinion about anybody, but you do have to get the statistics right. I mean, facts matter. And if you just get ahead of this and just say, hey, I made a mistake on my numbers, then this thing is over and everybody respects you for your opinion. And, you know, you might like Boston, I might like the Yankees. You know, it's okay to have difference of opinions. Well, she got upset with me on the phone and I was like, Sheryl, you know, I'm not doing anything to hurt you. I'm just sharing, we're talking. And so our relationship, it pretty much is not happening at this point. I tried to talk to her at the Final Four. Right. She didn't want to talk to me. My life's going to be good or great with or without Sheryl Swoopes in my life.
Then Stephen A. Smith got involved, and on a national ESPN platform, he called Swoopes' position insane. But Smith went further than just fact-checking her. He pointed out that Swoopes had done an entire episode of her Queens of the Court podcast praising the Indiana Fever, talking up Aaliyah Boston, Lexi Hull, and Kelsey Mitchell, and never once mentioned Clark. Not once. Smith's take was direct. There is no way in hell you just accidentally left Caitlin Clark's name out of that soliloquy that you dropped about the Indiana Fever. He argued that Swoopes knew the game too well for the omission to be anything other than personal. When Stephen A. Smith thinks you've crossed a line, that's a very specific kind of problem, because his audience is enormous and they were all watching.
There seems to be some haterade in the league in regards to Clark, starting with WNBA legend Sheryl Swoopes herself.
The Dallas Wings pulled Swoopes off their broadcasts against Indiana after all of this went public. Nancy Lieberman stepped in as color commentator for the Wings game against the Fever on September 1st. A replacement that Smith and plenty of others read as directly tied to Swoopes' conduct. Lieberman had fact-checked Swoopes publicly, defended Clark with actual data, and then landed in Swoopes' chair. The league didn't just move Swoopes out. It put the person who corrected her in her spot.
God, see, they ain't got Sheryl no more. Sheryl's gone. Sheryl's gone. Nancy still got her job, though. Nancy still got her job. They got Sheryl built. They got Sheryl the book. See? Sheryl was there last year. She ain't there no more.
Getting pulled off one team's broadcasts is a warning. Getting pulled off every single game in the entire league is a verdict, and that's exactly what happened to Swoopes heading into 2025. After the Wings situation blew up nationally, and the public feud with Lieberman and Smith made it impossible for the league to look the other way, the WNBA didn't quietly reassign Swoopes to non-fever games or give her a reduced schedule. They removed her from the broadcast rotation completely. When the Dallas Wings announced their 2025 broadcast team, Swoopes wasn't on it. Not buried in a reduced role, not limited to road games. Gone. ESPN, Fox News, and the Daily Mail all reported the decision as a formal league-wide action tied directly to her conduct around Clark. Not a contract dispute, not a scheduling change, not some quiet non-renewal that could be explained away.
It looks like the Dallas Wings have left off Mrs. Sheryl Swoopes on the broadcasting team for the 2025 season. If you guys remember, Sheryl Swoopes, she was on the broadcasting team last year, right?
There's a real financial story underneath all of this too. Broadcasting WNBA games used to be a modest gig. Decent visibility, but not the kind of work that changes your income in any serious way. That's not what it is anymore. Clark drove attendance and ratings numbers the league hadn't touched in years, and the new collective bargaining agreement that players just signed pushed salaries up hard, which pulled more media deals, more broadcast money, and more overall attention into the league's orbit. The whole ecosystem got more expensive and more watched at the same time.
I kept on saying it. I said, Sheryl Swoopes, you are going to find yourself out of the media so fast by how you're, by how you're moving, how you're talking on other players, talking on other people's podcasts.
Swoopes got fired right as all of that money started moving. She'd spent 2 years dismissing Clark's impact on camera, and then the league Clark built essentially became too profitable to keep a Clark critic on air. Broadcasters who cover WNBA games in 2025 and beyond are covering a product that corporate sponsors, networks, and casual fans are actually paying attention to, and Swoopes is watching that from the outside. That's what changed her behavior, not some personal growth moment or a quiet realization that she'd been unfair. The stakes went up, the money got real, and suddenly Swoopes started showing up on ESPN, saying things about Clark and the Fever that she'd spent 2 years refusing to say. Fans who'd followed the whole saga from Gil's Arena to the Lieberman screenshots to the Stephen A. Smith segment watched Swoopes pop up with kind words about Clark, and they had a very specific reaction to every single word that came out of her mouth.
We've got a Sheryl Swoopes switch up. I think, either you get on the bandwagon or you get left behind.
Here's where it gets interesting, because Swoopes didn't go quiet after getting fired. She went the complete opposite direction and started showing up everywhere. And every single time she opened her mouth, something nice about Caitlin Clark came out of it. Coming into the 2026 season, Swoopes appeared on ESPN and started talking up Clark and the Indiana Fever in terms she'd never once used before. Calling Clark a generational talent, praising how much stronger Clark looked after her off-season work, straight up telling viewers, this Indiana Fever team, they have put the pieces together this off-season, and I'm excited to see what they're going to do. That's a direct quote from Sheryl Swoopes. The same Sheryl Swoopes who spent 2023 and 2024 calling Clark's scoring record illegitimate and describing her rookie season as not dominating. Now she's excited. Now she's a believer.
And then you're bringing back Aaliyah Boston, who continues to get better every single year. Can we talk about Kelsey Mitchell, who is just a walking bucket? How much stronger Caitlin got in the offseason. You know she was in the gym working on her game. This Indiana Fever team, they have put the pieces together in this offseason, and I'm excited to see what they're going to do.
Fans on social media weren't buying a single word of it. The reaction across Twitter, Reddit, and WNBA fan communities was immediate and pretty brutal, with people posting things like, oh, how she is changing her tune now, and joking that someone must have a gun to her head to get her to say any of this. And honestly, when your praise lands so unconvincingly that people think you're being coerced, that's not a great sign for your credibility tour. The Fever's actual roster heading into 2026 gave Swoopes real material to work with. which almost made the whole pivot more transparent. Clark's return from injury, Aaliyah Boston's interior presence, Kelsey Mitchell's scoring ability, Lexi Hull's defensive versatility, Sophie Cunningham's shooting, and the additions of veterans like Monique Billings, Tiasha Harris, Maisha Hines-Allen, and rookies Raven Johnson and Justine Pissot built Indiana into a genuine title contender. Vegas odds moved. League analysts started treating the Fever as a real championship threat. So Swoopes wasn't lying about the roster, right? The problem is, she watched all of this get built in real time while she was busy trashing Clark on camera. And now she's describing a team she could have been covering professionally if she hadn't burned her own seat down.
To all of our surprises, was somebody who's done nothing since 2023 but speak idiotically and speak like a delusional human being. The liar of them all. The king lie. The biggest projectionist of them all. I'm just going to make up things. Sheryl Swoopes.
The WNBA commercial she appeared in during this same stretch made things worse with fans who'd followed the whole story. Watching Swoopes turn up in league-branded content after the league removed her from every broadcast felt exactly like watching someone crash a party they'd been escorted out of. Podcast appearances followed, each one slightly more enthusiastic about Clark and the Fever than the last, and each one landing in front of the same audience that remembered Gil's Arena and the Lieberman screenshots. The new CBA is what's really driving all of this. WNBA players locked in real contracts, real salaries, real visibility, and the broadcast ecosystem around the league got more expensive and more watched overnight. Swoopes can see exactly what she's locked out of, and it's a lot more money and attention than it used to be. And then she actually called the Indiana Fever directly.
We went from the locker room is in shambles, players want to leave, it's a toxic environment, nobody wants to be there, the fans are terrible, to, I don't know, I wasn't even in the locker room, to the OGs that they brought in, the OGs that said, I want to come play over there.
After all of that, after Loyola, after Gil's Arena, after the Lieberman screenshots and the Stephen A. Smith segment and getting wiped from every WNBA broadcast in the league, Sheryl Swoopes reportedly reached out to the Indiana Fever directly and asked if she could join their broadcast team. Not the league, not ESPN, the Indiana Fever. Caitlin Clark's team. Let that sit for a second, because it's worth really thinking about what that phone call looked like. Swoopes spent 2 years telling anyone who'd listen that Clark's records weren't legitimate, got into public fights with the people who corrected her with actual data, and then watched the league fire her from every single game on the schedule. And her response to all of that was to call the organization built around the player she'd been targeting and ask them for a job.
It's just funny how we get to where I can't help but to find all of this amusing, and I'm glad that people found this amusing as well. Now she's on the Fever bandwagon. Phony people that hop on the bandwagon I'll never trust.
The Fever said no. Of course they said no. But the fact that Swoopes bypassed the league entirely and went straight to the Fever tells you where her head was at. Because that's not how someone acts when they think reinstatement is coming through normal channels. That's how someone acts when they've run out of road and they know it, when the ESPN Praise Tour didn't produce results fast enough and the podcast appearances weren't opening any doors. So you try the one move you haven't tried yet, even if it's the longest of long shots. The Fever's front office didn't build what they've built by handing out favors. That roster got constructed piece by piece with real intention behind every decision. And the people running that organization are not in the business of putting someone on their broadcast team who spent years taking shots at their franchise player. That's not a close call for them. That's an easy no.
And then obviously you guys remember last year when Dallas had to pretty much say, hey, you can't broadcast the Indiana Fever game after the little comments and things you had the game before or something like that. Yeah, I believe it was that. And Nancy Lieberman was the one who pretty much confronted Sheryl Swoopes about the whole situation and let her know, like, hey, you know, we got to keep it this, we got to keep it that, keep it about basketball.
Swoopes is now sitting outside a league that's bigger, better paid, and more watched than at any point in its history. And she got there by running the exact same playbook she ran at Loyola, just in front of a national audience that kept receipts. At Loyola, 10 out of 12 players asked for their release rather than spend another season playing for her. In broadcasting, the league pulled her credentials rather than keep her on air for another season. Different setting, different decade, same result. The whole arc from Loyola to Gil's Arena to begging the Indiana Fever for a broadcasting role is so consistent it's almost hard to believe nobody saw it coming sooner. Swoopes picked targets, repeated false claims, refused to back down, and eventually burned through whatever goodwill she'd built until there was nothing left to burn. The Fever roster she's now publicly praising on ESPN is the same roster she could have been covering professionally with a real paycheck in a league that's finally paying real money, if she'd just called Clark's game straight when it mattered. Does Swoopes deserve everything that's happening to her? Let me know down in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and turn on all notifications so you never miss out. Click the video on the screen, and we will see you in the next one.